This is CNN Money Switzerland with your latest coronavirus news updates. I'm Ana Maria Montero. Coming up on tonight's program, a win for Ticino and new decisions taken by the Swiss Federal Council today. We bring you details from the press conference and break it all down. Plus, firm calls to action for startups and SMEs. Just what are they asking for? And what can be done to keep the, quote, backbone of the Swiss economy intact? We talk to Venturelab and IMD tonight. But first, let's look at some headlines here in Switzerland this Friday. The Swiss government announced today the cantons will be allowed to shut down industrial production under specific conditions should there be a risk of spreading coronavirus. The decision comes after Ticino ordered non-essential industries to cease production last Sunday without consulting the federal government. The Federal Council also approved a delay of up to 90 days for rents, both residential and commercial. And it also confirmed that 51,000 companies applied for short-term work compensation, including 656,000 employees, which comprise 13% of Switzerland's working population. And the coronavirus has made its way to the very top of the British government. Prime Minister Boris Johnson announced on Twitter today that he has tested positive and had developed mild symptoms of the virus. Johnson will still manage the government's response to the pandemic via video conference and will follow guidelines and remain isolated for 7 days. And measures to support businesses in Switzerland during the coronavirus crisis have forgotten startups, so says Venturelab, a startup support organization. This week, they conducted a survey of Swiss startups and found that more than half of them face an existential threat. Venturelab also now calling on the Federal Council to do more. Hannah Wise caught up with the co-founder of the organization to find out more.
Well, the reaction from the startup ecosystem was that some measures which are in short-term work or others are good, but when it comes to the bank loan guarantee which were given, startups have been completely forgotten. The criteria that was used is that it will be 10% of turnover. And for most companies, particularly the deep tech startups who are in long development cycle, they do not have turnover right now. They're cut in the middle of this crisis, and this criteria would make them fully ineligible for having a bank loan guarantee in case they would need it and want to use it.
Uli Maurer this week, though, was asked that very question, and he said that, the turnover as a measure, as a point of reference, won't be used for all startups. So there are some measures that can be done for these very small, very young companies.
Yes, but what has been applied here and what we have received so far as news confirmed by some banks with whom we've been in contact is that what they will use is adding the salary paid in the past year. So, and this would only apply to 2019-born startup. So I'm taking 10% of salaries paid plus apparently capped at 500. So 10% of 500 making 50,000 maximum bank loan guarantees for startup only born in 2019 does by far not cover what we call here deep tech startups.
So exactly, are these deep tech startups, are they the ones particularly exposed then in Switzerland?
Well, definitely. And for them, we need to find other criteria. That's why Venturelab, we went out with proposals, many people in the ecosystem as well. And for us, what was very important is to say we've been investing very heavily now and been able to attract a lot of investment into startups, into very brilliant startups that will create the jobs of tomorrow. History has shown that. And we want actually a criteria suggestion could be that the investments that are being made over the past years into these companies are being taken on addition to the turnover that those startups have realized in 2019, which would actually bring back a lot more of the value that has been invested and has been put into the startup. And then these criteria, 10% of the investment made would make companies able to apply for more significant bank loan guarantees in case they want to use it.
I mean, how concerned are startups? I mean, you've conducted this survey, you've been speaking to them. How worried are they about the future of their businesses?
Well, clearly, it's a major worry. Or close to 60% of these companies have told us it's really an existential threat. I mean, basically, they are really fully exposed, I think, as many companies, and they will be also fully exposed on the longer term. It really changes. And for an extra 30%, they said it is definitely an extremely severe threat that they will try to weather with major cost-cutting measures, major adaptation, but yet they would definitely need to have access to such tools in order to pass this period.
And then, therefore, what happens, or how would that impact the Swiss economy going forward post-crisis?
Well, we're here putting at jeopardy some of or really at risk, some of the most promising companies in innovative companies in the high-tech sector. We're talking medtech startups, we're talking biotech startups, we're talking startups in several advanced engineering fields, who are really the ones that those who were born 10 years ago, today are the ones who are representing 200, 300, or 400 jobs in some cases, but are really creating the mass of these most innovative, high added value job companies. And those are the ones right now who are in the middle of their development cycles, which are fully at risk, and we're just potentially losing them. And we will see this impact in 3-4 years extremely strongly, or even before.
So what's your message then to the Federal Council today?
Well, the survey we proposed had over 400 respondents, and 90% of them told them we need another system. The one around investment is something that would definitely help, that would be regarded as very usable by over 80% of them, so that at least they look at it, that they find a solution. We know that at the cantonal levels, we have been in touch, of course, with several partners. They are also looking with complementary measures to help the startups. But if the Federal Council looks at it and basically puts this as a general rule, it will definitely make things stronger in order to move forward, and definitely makes the startups stronger. So we cannot lose. The key message is we simply cannot forget and cannot lose right now all these startups. We've been investing so much of this innovation potential, which are the really high added value jobs we have in the future.
All right, Jordi Montserrat, thank you very much indeed.
Thank you very much.
Now, SMEs are certainly taking a hard hit and are threatened as the coronavirus pandemic continues to shut down businesses and keep workers at home. IMD Chairman Michel Damart has called for a more aggressive 200 billion Swiss franc commitment by the Swiss Confederation. Arturo Briz, a professor at IMD, co-authored an article with Damart, a call to action to make sure the Swiss economy can come out of this crisis unscathed. He joins us now. Arturo, thank you so much for being with us here tonight. So, as we said, SMEs are definitely taking a hard hit, very threatened. We saw in the Federal Council's announcement this afternoon, they went through some numbers, 13% of the active population, of which, on average, most of these are SMEs. So how alarmed are you?
Well, SMEs in Switzerland account for a large part of the employment, and that's obviously the main worry. At the same time, they're also the most financially fragile, because when it comes to cash holdings relative to their expenses, these companies are going to be in dire straits extremely soon. Plus, they don't have easier access to finance as much as the large organizations do. And that's why I think we need to make sure that they don't only sail through this crisis in a healthy way, but when the crisis is over, hopefully so, they can also restart the economy in good terms, financially speaking.
Mm-hmm. Now, almost 2 weeks ago, we heard from prominent Swiss economists asking for 100 billion as a fund. In your article, you're saying we need twice that, so 30% of the Swiss GDP. How do you propose to make this happen?
Well, in Switzerland, we live in paradise. I mean, I am Spanish. My government has committed 20% of its GDP on a plan to help the economy, taking into account that the Spanish government bears a debt to GDP of 130%. In Switzerland, it's only 40%. And add to that for the last 3 years, Switzerland has been running a budget surplus, primarily because the Confederation has been able to raise more taxes than expected. Compared to any country in the world, the United States, Germany, France, any other country that is suffering the pandemic, Switzerland is financially the healthiest balance sheet in the whole world. And that's why we believe that the Confederation has to and can make a bigger effort than any other economies. And certainly with a lesser damage to the economy in the longer term.
Okay, so if we look at the breakdown of this, I mean, should Switzerland then add more debt?
Well, think about this. Germany now has committed to borrow more than 300 billion euros when Germany has a debt to GDP of 70%. For Switzerland, increasing its debt to GDP ratio from 40% to 60%, which would put it well below the German levels now, would add, again, this 250 billion that we would need to finance a very, very aggressive fiscal plan. I don't think that in the current debt markets and with the current strength of the Swiss franc, this would be unfeasible. Quite in the contrary, I think that it would be somehow easier for the Confederation relative to any other economy, for example, the European economy, to finance those bonds.
You also propose that the Swiss Confederation pay all salaries of Swiss employees for 3 months with a cap. Yes. I don't know how many people are going to argue with this.
Well, I think that in times of need and when we're living through a war economy, I think we need to have aggressive measures. Our proposal is much more than an unemployment subsidy. I mean, we're thinking not only of those independent workers who are going to lose their job because they don't have an activity, of those companies that will be forced to shut down, but also of those companies that need to prioritize investments and R&D and other type of expenses that will allow the company to sail through the future without worrying about paying salaries. So our idea is to have the Confederation covering those salaries so companies can continue operating in a healthy way with a cap.
I was going to say, yeah, it's important to say that it's with a cap. So it's not you're going to get your full salary. I mean, there is a cap to that salary. You also say that with regard to entrepreneurs and self-employed workers, you extend this subsidy to them as well. Does this also include startups?
Yes, certainly. I mean, all Swiss employees, or whether independent or not, and we're about estimating a number of about 5 million people, should be eligible for such a subsidy.
Okay, so we just saw that interview with Venturelab, who's really advocating for the Federal Council to do more on behalf of the startups. Is this a lifeline that they could really use, and would this be enough for them?
Yes, certainly. I mean, my main contention is that this is not like the 2008 crisis. I think we cannot just rely on monetary policy. We need very aggressive fiscal policies. And fiscal policies need to protect employment and need to make sure that we preserve the quality of life for our people. And of course, startups, which are also accounting for a large number of employees in Switzerland, they should be supported as well.
All right. Thank you so much for joining us tonight, Arturo, and for your insights. It was a pleasure.
Thank you.
Japan is preparing itself for the economic impact of delaying the Olympics over the coronavirus pandemic. By some estimates, it could wind up costing tens of billions of US dollars. CNN's Will Ripley reports.
No visit to Tokyo's Asakusa neighborhood is complete without a ride on a rickshaw. But this year, almost no one's riding.
This is a lot of empty rickshaws here.
Yes, we have to fight, like coronavirus.
Finding customers is like fighting over scraps for rickshaw drivers like Yoshi Furuya. And now that Tokyo 2020 is postponed at least until next year, the road ahead is looking long and lonely. Japan's tourism industry is bracing for an economic bloodbath. Millions of jobs and billions of dollars are on the line.
When you combine postponing the Olympics and the coronavirus outbreak, can you put a price tag on how much that's going to cost Japan?
It's likely that the loss will be around 36 billion US dollars.
36 billion US dollars.
The damage is quite big.
Keio University professor Sayuri Shiraishi says that astronomical cost includes cancellation and maintenance fees for more than 36 Olympic venues, compensation for thousands who've already purchased condos in the Olympic Athletes' Village, billions in broadcasting rights and prepaid advertising.
If we do it next year, we don't know how successful this 2020 Olympics will be.
More than 4 million tickets are already sold, some seats costing up to $3,000.
$800 for 2 tickets.
Yes.
Wow.
Demand was so high, ticket holders like Kenji Fuma had to enter a lottery. He wonders if his luck has run out.
Has anyone told you what's going to happen with your tickets?
Nothing did happen yet, so even the government didn't send any emails and didn't make any announcements, so we're just waiting for the next steps.
Fans are not the only ones waiting. Olympic organizers need to sort out a mind-boggling jigsaw puzzle, resolving scheduling conflicts with other major sporting events, rescheduling Olympic qualifiers. Kaori Yamaguchi is a 1988 Olympic judo bronze medalist and a member of Japan's Olympic Committee. She knows postponement has a huge impact on athletes. If the games are delayed by a year, their training schedule drastically changes, she says. But I think the athletes can handle it. Yamaguchi says this is a marathon, not a sprint. The coronavirus crisis will end. The Olympics will go on. Japan will have its moment in the global spotlight. Will Ripley, CNN, Tokyo.
Remember, you can get involved in today's news by checking out our social media pages, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn. Stay in touch. Let us know what you're thinking, whatever your comment. It's always great to hear from you. And don't forget that also everything is available on our website, as always, cnnmoney.ch. On behalf of the team, I thank you so much for joining us this evening. We urge you to stay home, stay safe, and we'll see you next time.